The evidence is weak. There's new scientific evidence today that living near power lines can trigger or even cause a deadly disease. James Thomas has the story.
Well, they're right next door.
You grew up with them, so initially there was no worry.
But that's not the case for Gary and Jill Christie now. They believe mounting science on the dangers of living under power lines is cause for serious concern.
Kids and leukemia, that's the last thing I want my two children to get.
It's packed the LA County Board of Supervisors meeting today to protest giant cell towers at their stations. CBS 2's Dave Lopez shows us why they have serious concerns.
This is a step in the right direction, not only for the firefighters and the firefighter safety, but for the citizens we serve.
The problem is that wireless uses microwaves, and that when you microwave people, over time they get sick.
And for hours, speaker after speaker addressed the County Board of Supervisors today, saying that the installation of the county's new emergency radio system just isn't worth it.
We were saying to the federal government we need an extension for the purpose of answering substantial questions about this very important public safety matter.
Well, a battle over cell phone signals is taking place in Oakville tonight. Some residents are trying to prevent commercial cellular antennas from operating in their community. Groups concerned about the potential health effects and what impact power transformers and microwave radiation will have on neighbors and a nearby fire hall. Al Sweeney's live now with more on this story for us tonight. And Al, some pretty serious concerns here.
More than 2/3 of Americans have cell phones, but there's long been a question: does heavy cell phone use hurt human health? Lindsay Davis reports on a major new study which for the first time shows cell phones do seem to have some mysterious effect on the brain.
A major U.S. government study on rats finds a link between cell phones and cancer, an explosive development in the long-running debate over the health effects of mobile phones. Here with more details is Wall Street Journal reporter Ryan Knutson. Ryan, thanks so much for being with us. Now, this $25 million study is the largest and most comprehensive study that's ever been done on cell phones and health effects, correct?
Yeah, this is one of the biggest studies that the U.S. government has ever done on this topic. It's probably the biggest study that the National Toxicology Program has ever done on anything. This has been such a debated thing over the years that when the government set out to do this, they really wanted to design a study that would try to not put the issue to rest, but really be the most comprehensive experiment.
Get to the bottom of it. And how was it conducted?
The phone company Sprint shut down a cell phone tower on the campus of a California elementary school after some parents said it may be linked to several recent cases of childhood cancer. Now, those families at Weston Elementary School in Ripping claim the tower could have exposed their kids to harmful radiation. Sprint says the tower is safe and has operated well below federal safety limits, but the company turned it off anyway and plans to move it to a new location. Carter Evans spoke to the families at the center of the controversy.
My son missed growing up with his friends. My son lost all of his hair. It's not something that I wish on anybody to watch their child go through what our children have gone through.
We start tonight with a cell tower on a local school campus. It's at the heart of a heated controversy and an ongoing CBS 13 investigation. I'm Tony Lopez.
And I'm Adrienne Moore. Sprint recently shut down a cell phone tower on a Ripon school campus after some parents worried it was linked to several recent cancer cases.
Sprint says the tower is safe but is moving it to a different site. CBS 13 investigator Julie
are in the non-ionizing radiation part of the electromagnetic spectrum and are not known to damage DNA or cells directly. But some scientists speculate that they could cause cancer in other ways. Classification was based on studies that showed a twofold increase in childhood leukemia among children with exposure to high levels of magnetic fields in the home. But for more on that, we checked in with a cancer
Gary, how close do you think they are to your house? I'd say about 60 metres.
For the research to apply to Gary and Jill's kids, they'd need to have a particular gene variant, which was identified in the study. But even without it, some scientists say the latest research is further evidence of the dangers of power lines.
This supports the research which we did in Tasmania, which was published last year, which showed a link between living close to power lines as a child and developing leukemia, lymphoma and related disorders in adult life.
University of Tasmania's Professor Ray Lowenthal authored a report that found that every single year a person lives within 50 metres of a power line, their risk of cancer increases by 7%. In 10 years, your chances of getting cancer leap to 70% more likely living under a power line.
The risk seems to be greater the closer people live to power lines, the longer they live there, the younger the person is at the age.
The study also found that people who live within 50 metres of a high voltage power line were at double the risk of developing cancer than those who had never lived within 300 metres of a power line. These are frightening statistics for the Gristies.
What do you think the solution is?
Underground.
For decades, residents from around the country have campaigned against overhead power lines.
No ifs, no buts, underground.
My name is Frank Lima, and I'm the president of United Firefighters of Los Angeles City, also a 24-year veteran and captain with the LA City Fire Department. And I'm here to clarify Mr. Malon from LA Rick's comments in that UFLAC has written multiple letters in opposition to the Public Safety Chairman Mitchell Englander, Mayor Garcetti, and Council President Herb Wesson, and we continue to be opposed to this project, and that is why we are here in support with our brothers and sisters from Local 1014. We are not comfortable that the project included a CEQA waiver. CEQA exists for a reason, and this project should have been subject to our state's environmental regulations. I want to be clear once again that UFLAC supports Local 1014, opposes the LA Ricks putting poles up where we live and spend 1/3 of our lives at the firehouses. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Some points to make. We can opt out and we can go to a wired program that will be absolutely safe, one using phone lines rather than this wireless program that's being pushed down our throats by the FCC that is led by the wireless industry and their representatives. This is an important fact. The other thing, comparing it to smoking is very appropriate. Studies for wireless have actually shown tumor growth in 10 to 15 years. The average tumor growth for a smoker is 30 years. So we're talking about something twice to 3 times as carcinogenic as cigarette smoke, and we're involuntarily exposing our population to it 24 hours a day. This doesn't seem wise at all. We need to stop ignoring the research and start taking care of our people. We need you to represent us. The wireless industry is well represented in government and uses its money. We need you to represent us and fight for our health and well-being. Let's be the city we are that fights for initiatives, that takes care of the health of our citizens, that does the right thing, and says no to the money and says yes to the health and well-being of our citizens. This is what we need to do, and this is what I'm asking you to do.
Thank you, sir.
Theodora Scrotto, I'm Executive Director with Environmental Health Trust, and we're working on this issue nationally and internationally. I think, speaking of millennials that were discussed, millennials are entirely unaware that the technology they love could harm their future ability to have children, could damage their memory, and could cause brain cancer. Contrary to assumptions that the radiation is low, be aware that industry has stated publicly in presentations that the radiation increases into communities from a fully deployed 5G network would exceed several countries' current radiation limits. The U.S. has among the highest allowable radiation limits, in the world. Why? Because, as was stated 22 years ago, the EPA was actually defunded from researching and setting proper safety standards that protect us from biological effects and instead adopted radiation limits by industry-filled groups based on outdated science. And as a recent Harvard investigation documents, our agencies are captured at the highest levels with a revolving door between FCC leadership and wireless executives. Our regulatory system is broken, and that is why governments need to act at every level of government, not just with addressing the FCC. Cellular radiation is a new, rapidly increasing form of environmental pollution, and numerous peer-reviewed studies have shown effects from low levels, quote unquote, of this radiation, which are below FCC limits. The CDC just released findings of increased rates of brain, liver, and thyroid cancer among those under 20 in the United States. And replicated research has shown that this radiation can promote cancer growth when in combination with other toxic exposures. Hundreds of scientists have issued an appeal for urgent action to halt 5G because of this science showing effects below.
For the International Association of Firefighters, the largest union of first responders in North America, passed a resolution banning cell towers from firehouses until more research is done, because firefighters living at stations with cell towers were becoming sick. Their position states, whereas the brain is the first organ to be affected by RF radiation and symptoms manifest in a multitude of neurological conditions, including migraines, extreme fatigue, disorientation, slowed reaction time, vertigo, vital memory loss, and attention deficit amidst life-threatening emergencies, and whereas most of the firefighters who are experiencing symptoms can attribute them to the onset of the first week these tower antennas were activated. So what was happening was in California, where firefighters had cell towers located at or near their stations, they were getting sick. So the fire union stepped in and said, let's do a study. So they investigated where were the firefighters getting sick. They were getting sick at stations where the firefighters were living. Whereas RF radiation is emitted by these cellular antennas, and RF radiation can penetrate every living cell, including plants, animals, and humans. And whereas both the U.S. and Canadian governments established regulatory limits for RF radiation based on thermal measurements, not non-thermal, which is what we're talking about. So what the union said was, we don't want the cell towers at our stations. They concluded the fire department, the department facilities where firefighters live and work are not the proper place for this technology, which can endanger their health. And we submit, if they're not the appropriate place for fire stations, then they certainly aren't the appropriate place for our schools, our neighborhoods, our playgrounds, and our parks. Please change your ordinance, make it more responsible. Thank you.
Take one frog in cold water. Add boiling water, and the frog jumps out. However, if you heat the water very slowly, the frog will just sit there and sit there and sit there all the way to 100 degrees centigrade. Of course, we're a lot smarter than frogs, aren't we?
advanced and hired an expert.
I wouldn't send my kids there at all. It absolutely is dangerous.
Eric Windheim is an electromagnetic radiation specialist and found levels far higher than the district's expert.
Children that are still developing and their cells are still dividing, it's the worst possible time of their life to be exposed.
He says it's not just a cell tower, it transmits wireless frequencies.
Instead of only going 300 yards like regular Wi-Fi, my max can go 30 miles.
Parents want the mast removed, but the district won't budge. And while the district has sent plenty of letters to those parents tell me that this fight is far from over.